Good morning to everybody. The Ministry of Telecommunications, Science and Technology and the Office of the Prime Minister today welcomes a team under the aegis of the World Bank to conduct an open data readiness assessment in Antigua and Barbuda. The Open Data Readiness Assessment is a comprehensive exercise that will look at a number of dimensions inside and outside of government. The value proposition of open data and crowdsourcing has gained momentum, with Antigua and Barbuda beginning to benefit from this proposition. And I am pleased to welcome to Antigua a team to undertake the Open Data Readiness Assessment. Andrew Stott, Senior Consultant with the World Bank and a former Deputy Chief Information Officer with responsibility for digital engagement and open data in the United Kingdom. Dr. Maurice McNaughton, Director of the Center of Excellence at the Mona School of Business and Management at the University of the West Indies in Kingston, Jamaica. Dr. McNaughton is also the head of the Caribbean Open Institute at the Mona campus. The team also includes Dr. Patrick Hussain, who is a senior lecturer in computer science at the Faculty of Science and Technology at the UWI St. Augustine. Axel Rifon, Operations Analyst, ICT Sector Unit, the World Bank, and Amparo Arango, Consultant in ICT for Development from the Dominican Republic. The counterpart Antigua and Barbuda team is headed by Daryl Jackson, who is the Telecommunications Consultant here at the Ministry of Telecommunications. Open data is general information that can be freely used or reused and redistributed by anyone, either free or at marginal cost. From a public policy perspective, information held by governments should be freely available to use and reuse by the public so that it can be turned into useful applications, support transparency and accountability, and make sharing of data between public sector partners more efficient. The World Bank has chosen Antigua and Barbuda as a pilot country to undertake a regional open data readiness assessment and action plan. It is envisioned that this action plan could be adapted and replicated regionally for all OECS countries. Antigua and Barbuda has been chosen as the pilot country as a result of its leadership role as the ICT capital of the Caribbean. Over the next 5 days, the team will meet with senior representatives of approximately 25 key government agencies and civil society groups. Tomorrow evening at 7 p.m., that's tomorrow Tuesday, April 23rd, the Ministry of Telecommunications is hosting a public forum at the Cityview Hotel to discuss open data, opportunities in Antigua and Barbuda and the Caribbean. I am extending an invitation to you all and to the general public to attend. The admission is free. It is being held at the Cityview Hotel. The government expresses its thanks to our partners in this exercise. The World Bank, thanks to Anat Lewin, Operations Officer at the ICT Sector Unit at the World Bank in Washington, D.C., the Caribbean Open Institute, represented here by Dr. McNaughton, the International Development Research Center, the IDRC of Canada, and the team here at the Ministry of Telecoms led by Daryl Jackson. Following the completion of the readiness assessment, the details of which you will hear you'll hear about in a few minutes from Mr. Stott and Dr. McNaughton. Following the completion of that assessment, the government of Antigua and Barbuda will apply to the World Bank for funding under their trust fund for statistical capacity building to ensure implementation. So without any further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Andrew Stott to share with you what are some of the impelling reasons why Antigua and Barbuda is undertaking this open data readiness assessment. Following Mr. Stott's presentation, Dr. McNaughton of the Caribbean Open Institute will also present very briefly, following which we will take a few questions. Mr. Stott.
Okay, Dr. Mansur, thanks very much, and thank you for the welcome to Antigua and Barbuda. I'm going to talk a bit about open data at the global level and some of my experience doing it in the UK, and then Dr. McNaughton is going to talk about some specific Caribbean examples. Just a sort of introduction to open data and open government data. Governments collect and use a lot of data as part of their work, and they generate data about their operations, and they do inspections, and they collect data on agriculture, on roads, on health and education, and so on. And it's data about things that people care about. It's about health, it's about schools, it's about crime, it's about the environment, and it's about government and where their money goes. And just because the government has run out of things to do with this data doesn't mean that data can't be used by other people. And the idea of open data is if you release that data, then other people will find other useful things to do with it. The economists call the data non-rivalrous, that you can use data and then you can use it again. It doesn't wear out. And you can use it for different purposes, and that's what open data is about. It's about getting more transparent government. It's about improving public services, and it's about getting new economic growth, new social value, new businesses, and innovation going in the economy. The European Union the Vice President has described data as the new gold. And the European Union is working on an open data directive, which they estimate for the European Union could have benefits up to $200 billion a year in terms of overall benefit. And that's both benefit to businesses and it's benefit to end citizens. And also, government data is increasingly seen as part of the national information infrastructure. It's data that's can be used throughout the economy. Things like maps, things like company registers, things like weather can be used in all sorts of ways. And by making that data open, accessible to everybody, you get lots more innovation in that. One of the studies for the European Union showed that by releasing data that have previously been restricted or has been charged for, the amount of usage of that data went up by a factor of between 10 and 100 times. And the Danish government, who released their address register, found that they got a 70 to 1. They're now getting a 70 to 1 return on investment, which I can tell you certainly in the UK, a 70 to 1 investment return on an government IT project is pretty unusual. It's very good return on investment. And that data is being used for making better information services to the public, about transport, about public facilities, and about crime data, about the most downloaded smartphone applications. It's for business intelligence, what the government buys and who it buys it from. Publishing that data is picked up by business intelligence firms, and that improves the market of services to government, makes a more competitive supply market to government. It's being used for data analysis, so really crunching large amounts of data to find opportunities for savings or find new business possibilities. So in the UK we recently released anonymised, and it must be stressed that all this data needs to be anonymised before it can be released, anonymised records of prescriptions issued by doctors. And there's a startup firm which takes this data and analyses it against the latest medical knowledge and suggests ways in which prescribing techniques can be optimised in cost terms and clinical effectiveness terms. It's being used for operational efficiency and optimization, so data on roadworks. When utilities have to get a license to dig up the road from the local authority, that data, making that data available allows people to route their cars away from where the roadworks are. The local authority always knows a few days in advance whether the road's going to be dug up, but getting that data out allows people to avoid the congestion. And getting better financial products, such as flood insurance, is a very hot area for using open data. And it's driving business innovation in all sorts of ways. And in the UK, the business model of the National Mapping Agency has been changed to, it's no longer about selling data, it's about promoting business innovation. And government's a data user too, so making the data open makes that data easier to flow from one part of government to another. It's also being used for transparency, and the classic of this is where does my money go? Analysing the budget and allowing citizens to drill down to see how much money is being spent on what service and how much money is going to individual schools and individual hospitals. So patients and parents can challenge, well, this money is being granted by the government, why aren't we getting better services in my local school, in my local hospital? It's about organisational transparency, making clear who's responsible for what within government, and performance of individual schools, comparing individual schools, giving parents the information they need to choose schools for their children, and to question their teachers and head teachers on why the school isn't getting better exam results and making better use of the money it's being granted by the government. It's about performance of individual hospitals and clinics. Are they meeting government standards? Are they giving good services to their patients? So in this example, these are the 3 hospitals nearest where my mother lives. And this is the government inspectors who inspect each hospital. And this is the data on the cleanliness of those hospitals, and green is good and red is not so good. And this allows patients and their relatives to see the quality of local hospitals, and to challenge doctors about why you're sending me to that hospital when it doesn't have a good score. So empowering patients and parents. And data about crime and police. And this is the most visited government website in the UK, which has the data on individual crimes, and then they're located on a map. And in the first 2 years we had this, we had 53 million visits for people checking on crimes in their neighbourhood. And this site has actually got all sorts of surrounding information to get the public involved in things like neighbourhood policing and setting local crime priorities. So it's being used as a vehicle, the data is being used as a vehicle for the police engaging with the public. It can be about citizens improving official data, so not all government data is right. And here's an example of publishing data, which was the data on 300,000 bus stops in the UK, and 18,000 bus stops were corrected by civil society, by the OpenStreetMap community. So that's got better public data on where the bus stops are, but also that's improved the government data. And it's about crowdsourcing data. Now, I know this isn't a problem that happens much in Antigua, but this is actually crowdsourcing a snowfront moving across the UK. And I've actually got a live animation of this, and this is just people reporting how hard it's snowing and their postcode with a hashtag UK Snow on Twitter. And the UK Weather Bureau are now very interested in using this crowdsourcing to gather another source of data on weather in real time. We're now sort of 4 years into the worldwide open data movement, which was launched by Tim Berners-Lee, who was the inventor of the World Wide Web, the web of documents, and he now wants to create a web of data. There are over 260 governmental open data sites across the world on the central register of these. But if we zoom in on the Caribbean, there's still a lot of work to do. And that's what the Caribbean Open Institute has started to work on, and I invite Dr. McNaughton to talk a bit about the work there.
Thank you, Andrew. Morning, colleagues. Dr. Mansour. It's a great privilege, and in fact, we are an incredible opportunity for us to be invited to participate in this important mission. And I must thank the government of Antigua and the World Bank for extending the invitation. And I do so on behalf of the Caribbean Open Institute and our affiliated institutions, the Monash School of Business and Management, the University of the West Indies, and my colleagues, Dr. Patrick Hussain from UA St. Augustine, and Amparo, Ms. Amparo Arango from the Dominican Republic. Andrew has given an overview of what has been happening with open data worldwide. It's a phenomenal movement. I don't think I've seen any other political or technology initiative that has evolved as rapidly as open data. And so it's quite interesting when we look at the Caribbean snapshot to see that we have not started in earnest. But it's very early days. I mean, this thing is largely traced back to the Obama administration in 2007 and the declaration of the Open Government Directive. The Caribbean Open Institute, we really see as a catalyst, as an enabler. And we're using it as an opportunity to build institutional capacity in the Caribbean to be able to engage with governments, forward-looking governments like the Antigua and Barbuda government, to make open data relevant and contextual to the region. And so some of the things that we've been doing, I think we've found that open data makes a lot more sense when you demonstrate by example, because it can be a quite abstract conversation. And so one of the things I want to do here very briefly is just share with you some of the initiatives that we've been involved in over the last year and a half through this project called the Caribbean Open Institute, which is a coalition really. So a group of Caribbean stakeholders got together, facilitated by the International Development Research Center out of Canada, who's funding this initiative, and sort of came up with this model of engagement and facilitation. And I'll just share with you a couple of examples which perhaps might give it some meaning in our context. So one of them is agriculture, and agriculture is we have consistently the same challenges and issues across the region with agriculture. And in Jamaica, a lot of our extension services to farmers are provided through an agency called RADA. It's the Rural Agriculture Development Authority. And over the years, as part of those extension services, they gather this huge amount of data about farmers and their properties and their production activity. And this typically is used for statistical reporting and planning and so forth. And so we engage with RADA at an agency level to take some of this data, agriculture data, and make it open data. And it took us into perhaps looking at, well, a lot of this data is just, statistical data. How do we use it to create greater spatial visualization of what's happening in agriculture? Because agriculture is by its nature geospatial. So it's one thing to get a report which says this is the production activity that's happening. It's another thing to look at a map of the island and see all of the farms. And you can drill down and see every single farm, every single farmer, the size of that farm, what they plant, and color code that by the size of the farm. So that makes it more meaningful, much more interesting. We did some further work on that by being able to provide query capabilities. And now this is on our website, right? So this is taking RADA's data, which they've had for years, and getting a bunch of smart developers and building some of these applications. And so this is just now visualization of agriculture data. And so what you've done there is take that data and extended its use. And Andrew made the point earlier that the value of data increases with use. The more open you make it, the more people you expose it to, the greater the value proposition. So that instead of just the Ministry of Agriculture, you now have current farmers, you have potential people who want to get into farming, you have agri-processors who want to see what the availability of production capacity is, you have these food distributors, and I think in all of our countries, agriculture has great linkages into things like tourism and other sectors. So just making that data open and accessible creates a much broader audience. I think one of the most interesting examples of use we saw was when we had this application at our annual agriculture trade show. And a couple of teachers came by and said, hey, this is great, I can use this in the classroom. Because typically when we're teaching kids about agriculture and the different areas of production across the island, you can't visualize it. Showing them a picture of this and being able to query that is so much more meaningful. And I found that quite interesting. But it goes beyond visualization, so that what we started to do was build some mobile apps. And one of the interesting examples was a mobile application that we call the Agro Assistant. So we send out 110 extension officers that go out on a daily basis and work with farmers. And typically when they're out there, they don't have all the information that they need. So just with a tablet and having access to this open data, an extension officer now has all the information about the farmers in that vicinity, about the farms, about the crops they're planting. They can access price data so that all of a sudden the extension officer becomes a knowledge worker. He has access to an incredible amount of information that previously he would not have had in the field in a mobile context. So those are interesting examples, and we're doing those as kind of demonstrations of what is possible with open data. Another example has to do with, again, something that is common across most countries, the budget. So that every year our government publishes the national budget, and it's published on our website as 85 PDF documents. And that doesn't mean a great deal to a lot of people. So you have the budget debates and the discussions about the budget. But we had some students take this data and scrape it and use a platform called Open Spending and visualize that data. And it makes it a lot more meaningful. Now, this is not a pretty picture. I mean, it, for instance, shows the significant challenges we have with debt servicing and the size of that relative to the rest of the budget. But as you can imagine, a visual like this conveys far more meaning to the average person about what the budget means than just looking at numbers and text in a paper. So those are just some examples of what is possible with open data. The last point I want to make here is that for open data to make sense, it's not just what the government has to do, there's a whole ecosystem around it. And a large part of our engagement thus far has been what I call from the demand side. So we've been working through the tech community, we've been working through academia, we've been working through the media to talk about their roles and the possibilities for what open data can do. And if you can get this ecosystem going, Minister, then it becomes quite powerful, what we consider engine for innovation and growth. And there are enormous possibilities around this. So again, we're quite excited to be here. We think we can contribute some contextual perspective, and we look forward to working with the Antiguan government on this.
Thank you very much, Dr. McNaughton. So at this point, what we'll do is, this is basically the briefing, and we'll open the floor for questions. Just maybe at your first attempt, just tell us your name and the media outfit that you represent. The floor is open. Nashita, they're supposed to use that phone there, that microphone there.
Okay, Kyle Christian from Observer Media. And my question is, the Minister, you said the next step would be a readiness assessment. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what would the persons doing this readiness assessment look for in terms of determining Antigua's readiness? What are the benchmarks?
Well, this is the readiness assessment team, so Mr. Stott will answer that question.
Okay, the readiness assessment is a methodology developed by the World Bank from a panel of international experts, and also had a public comment on what were the most critical factors in getting a successful open data initiative. We identified 8, and those are the things that we'll be exploring. The first is political leadership, is the political backing to take this through, because opening up government data isn't the natural way of officials. So it often needs strong political will to take it through. And I think you've heard this morning some of the political will that already exists in Antigua to do that. The second is policy and legal frameworks. So laws about copyright, about freedom of information, about privacy, and what are the restrictions on government releasing its data, and where are the well-established legal principles that can be applied to open data. So, for instance, under the Freedom of Information Act in Antigua, there is already an obligation on each public body to publish some basic information about itself, which is a good start on the open data road. The third is the institutions of government how are cross-government programs managed, what's the role of the IT director and the coordination of IT systems, and so on. The fourth is to actually talk to some of those key data sets that elsewhere in the world have been found to be useful data sets that people can use. Because any government can put out boring data. It's about, if the program's going to be successful, it's got to be about data that matter to people. So that's data about schools, data about hospitals, data about crime, data about mapping data, weather data, inspection data, and so on. And we've got about 20 categories of data that we've identified that are really useful in terms of getting reuse, and we'll be talking to the different ministries responsible for that data. And then on the demand side, who is already asking for data, what's the evidence of demand for data, and what are the skills to use that data. So then that skills, both the technical skills and developers who can use that data, but also skills, say, among journalists in using data to find stories and create stories, actually. A lot of data journalism is not about finding out stories that already exist and no one wants you to know. It's actually delving into that data and finding new stories. And also talking about the finance of how an open data initiative would be financed, and Dr. Mansour has talked a bit about how that might be done here, and also just about the technological infrastructure, broadband access, mobile access, and the like. Because although not all the uses of data are actually through websites and mobile applications, that's one of the ways in which innovators can create new imaginative ways to use government data.
Okay, and so just a follow-up, is there any sort of timeline that you know of when this will be conducted and when it will finish?
The World Bank's idea on the Open Data Readiness Assessment was to do something that was quick and was action-orientated. So it won't be a 500-page report. It'll be a short report, principally about what key actions the team recommend to the government to take if they want to move forward open data. And we're here this week, and this is the evidence gathering week. And over the next 4 weeks or so, we'll be drafting a report and working on that with the government of Antigua.
Alex Holder, Interior Chronicle. Minister, Dr. McNaughton spoke of some of the implementations in Jamaica. Can you speak to what the government expects to do exactly with this in the short term here in Antigua?
Well, I'm hoping that from the report that Mr. Stott and his team will issue, that we can find some low-hanging fruit and begin implementing. I do want to say that this is a fairly new area for the Caribbean, and we intend, obviously, to collaborate more closely with the Caribbean Open Institute, because I think at the end of the day, this open data crowdsourcing momentum has value-added applicability in our setting. And one of the areas that I have discussed with the team is how we can leverage on the existing data sets and, for instance, prepare for disasters or prepare to recover from disasters, especially those that we can't plan for. Every year we have the hurricane season, as you know, but earthquakes and the like, we can't necessarily predict when they're going to come. So I envisage a twofold approach. One is looking at the report, and as I had said in my introductory remarks, that we will definitely apply to the World Bank for funding under the Trust Fund for Statistical Capacity Building to ensure implementation. There is an opportunity for us to be able to implement all of the other aspects of the report. Clearly, these are some of the issues that will have to be escalated to the cabinet and so on. But I do want to state without reservation that the government is committed to working on this open data initiative and making data sets available to the civil society, to other agencies of government, and as Andrew indicated, making it available to those entities that may not at first glance appear to have an interest in the data, but they can take the data and do something new with it. Okay, folks, that's it. Well, thank you very much for coming today. And we are extending an invitation to you to also attend the open forum tomorrow, which you will hear significant more details, from Dr. McNaughton and the team and Mr. Stott about, this whole concept of open data. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation to come to this media briefing today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.